Hi, my name is Chuck Sutton, here with iZotope. Now, this might make you feel a little uneasy. That's because you experience a delay between what you just heard and what you just saw. Fortunately, delay in music production makes you feel not uncomfortable. Good, perhaps. It allows you to explore new forms of space, texture, and even new arrangement patterns, all from the same device. And we're going to explore that right now in the iZotope Nectar Pro. For this video, I want to start off with the most conventional form of delay and slowly work our way up. So right now I'm going to play you a basic piano loop. Now I'm going to open up Nectar Pro, delete the first two modules, and open up our first instance of delay. Right now you're hearing a ping-pong delay where the left and right ear are playing at slightly different times. And by hitting the chain link in the middle, both sides will now be synchronized. Each side also has its own feedback knob. By moving this up, we're getting a longer decay tail. This helpful EQ in the middle is making sure that we can change the EQ of the actual delay, not to mess with the frequencies of our original sound. The dry versus wet signal you're going to hear, the dry one being original and the wet one being the delay in this case. Now moving on from conventional delay, we're going to focus solely on texture with this next instance. Accompanying my piano loop are some strings I laid down. Just a heads up, if you like these strings, these are actually free from Spitfire Audio Labs. By default, Nectar Pro is set to tempo sync mode, giving us the option to delay by quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes. If we uncheck that, we'll get the option to delay by milliseconds. Listen to what happens when I shorten the delay and I up the feedback. We're getting these amazing, metallic, almost robot-like timbres on top of our strings. The human brain already knows what strings sound like, so by adding this slight variation, the brain can be engaged longer without having to adjust to an entirely new sound. I went ahead and I opened up some macro knobs next to Nectar Pro. That way I could hit configure, select my delay knob, and it automatically pop up as a slider in Ableton. This just makes automation easier on my part. So these are the strings before our delay. And now with just one instance of Nectar Pro's delay, the strings have a new texture that makes it more interesting to listen to over time. If we want our delays to feel more complex, we just have to feed more information through them. So now I'm grouping both of my sounds and adding delay on top of those delays. A nice thing about Nectar's delay specifically is it comes built in with a couple extra processing modes. Digital adds a slight bit crush layer. Tape exaggerates the feedback loop. Analog just makes everything feel fuller. Grunge adds a crunchy distortion based on how much your feedback is. And Echo echoes. And don't forget, always have fun when experimenting. I didn't use this in the final idea, but check out what happens when I simply start sliding around the time knob. So now we're ready to move on from sound design to arrangement. I've opened up a new audio track, set it to resample, and now it's listening to the piano, the strings, and all three instances of delay we've set up. Using my sampler's built-in slice mode, I was able to take the sample, pitch it up a bunch, and find some new sections that gave me a nice rhythmic feel. A quicker way to come up with arrangement patterns is through using a delay. By setting the feedback to 0 and by choosing a time of 1/8. I've set it up so every time I tap one note, we'll hear 2, and the second note will be perfectly quantized. I know it seems strange to set this up instead of just playing every MIDI note by hand. However, every time you play the first note and then the second quantized note plays itself for you, you get a moment to sit back and listen rather than having to constantly perform. Here, I decided to change the key of the sample and the project tempo. Alongside adding some drums so we could finally hear some rhythm alongside this, I started messing with some reverb also built into Nectar alongside the delay. So this main sound you're hearing is the combined piano and strings. I decided to go back, freeze the piano and strings individually, and make 2 new samples out of them so we could chop the piano and chop the strings separately. After I had my new chopped piano laid down, I wanted to slightly move over the timing and realized that delay is perfect for that. If you set your feedback to 0, and you set your dry wet to 100% so you don't hear the original signal, and you make sure you don't mess with the EQ, you'll be able to use the millisecond times to perfectly nudge over and start to add some pocket to whatever you're applying it to. In this case, I wanted the piano to feel a little bit later than where it was on the grid, so instead of moving my MIDI notes, I ended up just adding a delay and moving it over a couple milliseconds. For the string section that I added back in as a new sample, I ended up just making a quick volume macro for it, that way I could have a knob that makes it turn on and off. A sub bass was missing, so I fixed that. Included with your iZotope Producers Club subscription is Ozone Pro, so I decided to throw that on and use the maximizer and one of the EQs to just make this feel a little bit more loud and cohesive. And filled up the beat a little bit more by adding some hi-hat and some percussion sounds, and now this idea is fully fleshed out, or at least a really good section that I can pull apart and get inspiration for a full song, all coming from Nectar delay for space, timbre, and arrangement patterns. Thank you so much for watching. Check back often on Producers Club for more tutorials on how to get unstuck in your next production. Have fun creating.